President Biden's refusal to call for a ceasefire in Gaza has been a source of considerable controversy in Michigan, which holds its primary on Tuesday. The state has a significant Arab and Muslim population. A good number are Democrats. Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell joins us now from Southfield, Michigan. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Good morning, Margaret. Good to be with you.
Congresswoman, I know there is this protest effort underway to vote uncommitted among some Democrats to voice upset with the president. Will this damage him in a significant way?
So I want to say to you, I know many of this community. I lived in Dearborn for many years with my husband. And there are two campaigns. One is an abandoned Biden campaign, but the other, the major campaign that has made over 100,000 calls, we'll see how many people vote on Tuesday, are trying to make sure the president hears them. They have so many family in Gaza. I cannot tell you how many people I know who have lost grandparents, some parents, aunts and uncles and cousins, families who have lost 20 or 40 members. The casework that I'm doing, the people, I don't sleep at night. When you talk to them about how they don't have food, how they don't have any access to health care, they're drinking salt water and almost out of salt water, which isn't healthy. The sanitary conditions on the ground. One woman, the aunt of somebody, goes to the bathroom once a day. A month ago, there was one toilet for every 220 people, one shower for every 15,000 people. It's a nightmare, and they're scared for their families, and they're worried. But I also when we get a ceasefire, they need this ceasefire. Then we sit down and talk. And there are a lot of things that Donald Trump have done which are pretty horrific. And when you go back and review them, we're going to have to remind people of what he said.
I understand, and the nuance of what you are saying there, that this is not political, this is personal for a lot of people. On that note, we just heard from the Israeli Prime Minister that he is going into southern Gaza, whether President Biden likes it or not. You said you're working to help some of your constituents without family. Do you think the United States is doing enough to get Americans or families of Americans out of harm's way?
So I'm going to first say that none of us know what's going on in all of these negotiations. We know that Bill Burns was over the director of the CIA was in Paris. I know members of the National Security Council have been there. And I know that the president has directly told the prime minister that he is very concerned and he needs to be very careful. People need to understand that what is going on in Rafah right now, the population of Gaza is approximately 2.2 million people. 1.5 million of them have been forced into Rafah. We've already lost somewhere, we can argue about the numbers. Nobody denies that 12,000 children have already died. You just heard during that interview that the Doctors Without Borders have talked about 1,000 children who have lost limbs, the number of children that don't have families. It would be outrageous for further innocent civilians to be killed. I know that the White House is working very closely with a number of other countries to make it clear that we cannot continue this loss of life. And I continue to talk to the White House every day, tell them how important it is, and they assure me that the president is very engaged in delivering very direct messages.
But he has not rhetorically called for a ceasefire. He has, in private conversations, say he's working towards a temporary ceasefire. I know we need a ceasefire. A temporary ceasefire, if you get the 6-week ceasefire, then hopefully leads to. We also need we need the hostages to be returned. Understood.
There are people hurting on both sides. I think that's.
I want to talk to you more. I just have to take a commercial break, so stick with me if you would, Congresswoman. We'll be back with more. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman, you've been very clear, the humanitarian side of this conflict in terms of the political impact, was it a mistake for President Biden when he went to Michigan not to meet with any members from this particular community?
Look, I do believe that he is going to need to do that at some point down the road. This community is pretty angry right now. Look, I get protested. I had a town hall meeting this week and a number of people, and I think I've been one of the people that has been the most empathetic and has been working this issue really hard. I think he sent his team out. When he sent many of his team out, they developed relationships or connected with people that from both sides, I've heard that they've got ongoing conversations, and that's got to continue. I mean, this is really, look, Michigan's a purple state. I want to make that clear. It's been a purple state as long as I've been doing presidential elections. This is a very important issue here, but there are going to be other issues too. This state's going to be purple from now until November. And I'll tell you one more thing, because I am the person that fought 30 years to have a state like Michigan as one of the early primaries. I want to be talking about this issue now in February because it will matter in November and not on October 15th, which has happened too many times in previous presidential elections, that issues that matter in November aren't talked early.
Is the concern about reproductive health care access enough to cancel out these negative headwinds?
Look, Michigan had an unprecedented turnout 2 years ago when the issue was on the ballot. I'm going to be blunt. You know me, I am. We got to get young people, we got to get women, and we got to go in the union halls. And it's great that we've got the union presidents and the union organizations endorsing, but we've got to go in those union halls and draw the comparison, remind people about what Donald Trump did and didn't do. He talked, didn't deliver, and about what Joe Biden has delivered on. Women turning out is going to be absolutely critical. And they thought that when they voted on this on the ballot last year, they were safe. And now we've seen what the Alabama court has done in terms of IVF. Now the Republicans are scared to death and all running out and saying they support IVF. You know what? They've never been someone who's tried to get pregnant. They've never had to live through all of this. And I think a lot of women are going to be very emotional about their women's health decisions should be made between them, their doctor, their faith, and their family. And the federal government's got no business in it.
Congresswoman Dingell, thank you.
State government.
Thank you for being direct, as you said. We're going to leave that conversation there and pick up another one with Republican Brian Fitzpatrick and Democrat Jared Golden, two congressmen who have proposed an alternative to the foreign aid bill that passed the Senate and was declared by the Speaker of the House to be dead on arrival. Do you have any confidence that there's a way to get Republican leadership to move on this?
I do. We have a bipartisan bill. It's the only one in the House. And as of Friday, we have filed with the clerk expedited consideration. Normally, any kind of discharge like that would take 30 days to even be considered ripe. We figured out a way with the parliamentarian to expedite that to a 7-day period.
Just to be clear, this is to go around the Speaker of the House, who has refused to put a bill on the floor.
Well,
We're forcing him to consider.
It's just a way to get a mechanism to get a bill to the floor. And just to be clear about what we're trying to accomplish here, this is time sensitive. It's existential. I just got back from Ukraine. Adviva fell in the past 7 days. We lost Lake and Riley in the past 7 days. And in the past 7 days, 200 families had to bury their kids because of fentanyl. So what our bill does is it combines border security with this foreign aid, both existential. And we are forcing this bill to the floor to make sure that everybody acts because, as President Zelensky said, they have weeks and not months to get reinforcements on the front lines. So
you are trying to create an alternative to the bill that's about $60 billion. Yours is about $49 or so billion. Congressman Golden here, one of the things that's not in this bill, though, is humanitarian aid for Israel and for Ukraine. That's a non-starter for a lot of Democrats. And you have a Remain in Mexico border security policy here that forces migrants to wait outside the U.S. while their asylum claim is processed. How are you going to get fellow Democrats to get on board with this?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember here is that the votes are there to support Ukraine and our other allies, Israel, Taiwan. And I think that the votes are there on border security as well. You know, the Senate started with a bill. They had to boil it down to whatever could get 60 votes. The House needs to go through a very similar process. Brian and I are actually talking about having a more open debate on the House floor. Amendments should be in order. We need to find a way to get a deal that gets us to 218. I think a deal like that has to grow out of the middle and is unlikely to begin with a one-party solution.
So are you saying within that then, if your bill is up for consideration, amendments like adding in things like humanitarian aid are possible?
Potentially, yes, although I think that we also have to set priorities. So at the end of the day, what are the most important crises that we have to deal with in the here and now, in the very short term? And I would say that that would be securing our border and also helping avoid battlefield catastrophes in Ukraine.
Congressman Fitzpatrick, in choosing to go this route, it is defying the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who has said that, you know, he said the initial Senate bill was dead on arrival here. But then he is also seemingly speaking to the Democratic leader in the House. Are you concerned that you might be undercutting the opportunity to get that bigger package ultimately passed, or is it indeed so dead on arrival, you need this backup plan?
I don't think we're short-circuiting anything. We are adding a pressure point to make sure this gets done because we cannot afford to wait here. And, you know, if the Senate bill were to make it to the floor, it would have, you know, a lot of Republican votes.
You would vote for it?
I would. If our bill gets to the floor, it will also have a lot of votes. I mean, Jared can reflect the Democrat caucus perspective, but we think, you know, super majority, I think 2/3 of the House would support this. It is open to amendments. So our bare bones language was just a vehicle to get to the floor. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that we do not waste another day because these are, I mean, Ukraine is in dire straits right now. And that's what I wanted to do. That's why we're doing this. This is actually to complement all the other conversations going on and a potential compromise that might ensue.
Okay. Does the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, support what you're doing?
You know, they currently are pushing for the Senate bill. Obviously, they have a discharge petition. What I would say is that discharge petition doesn't have any Republican support. What we have now is a bill with a discharge petition that is led by a Republican.
This is just the procedural way to bypass leadership to get a vote.
Correct. That's right.
But you're not concerned, to borrow your phrase, that you're short-circuiting the bigger package?
My concern is what is it going to take to get a bill to the floor that can enable the House of Representatives to take action on two key priorities. One, how do we get our own border under control? Two, how do we support our allies in their existential fights in Ukraine and in Israel?
So we're also up against the deadline of this potential partial government shutdown March 1st. What is the timeline for what you're trying to do, and isn't the priority number one keeping the lights on?
Absolutely, and maybe we hitch a ride on the CR with this, right? I mean, hopefully we can.
Something this big, you think?
But yeah, this is not very big. This is, I mean, this is
$50 billion.
This is a pared down. Well, it's military aid, which, by the way, 80% of which gets spent inside the United States. That's a big misnomer that's being perpetuated. You either believe that what we're doing for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is an act of charity, or you believe it's an act of global security. We believe it's an act of global security. That's an investment. 80% of that money gets spent inside the United States, modernizing our own military in a way that we weren't prepared to do before.
Congressman Patrick McHenry was with my colleague here on CBS just the other day, and he said, you can either die as Speaker and worry about them taking you out, or live every day as your last. He's trying to prod the Speaker of the House to be more decisive. Is your action a sign that you also think Speaker Johnson needs to be more decisive?
I think Mike's in a tough political spot right now and needs all the help he can get from all of his allies in the House. So this is a mechanism.
Because he could be ousted.
That's always a risk. I mean, anytime you have a one-person motion to vacate, which, by the way, is never going to happen ever again, we're not going to buy that line ever again, because you see how it's manifested on the floor this cycle. It's basically created gridlock. We will never, ever agree to that ever again. But we got to get through this cycle. We have time-sensitive existential challenges right now. Ukraine is weeks away from giving up significant ground, and we cannot allow Russia to win. So what we are doing is adding an additional pressure point to get a bill to the floor that has bipartisan support in the House. My conversations with my Senate colleagues, any bill that comes out of the House with bipartisan support, in all likelihood, will emerge out of the Senate.
Even though this would not be what the Senate has already approved.
We're going to open up to amendments.
Okay.
Our vehicle is bare bones. It's going to be open up to amendments, and let the House work its will.
I think it's important to point out that the Senate would likely take up something that passes the House with a bipartisan vote.
We will watch this important move, and we'll talk more about Ukraine ahead in the program. We'll be right back. Saturday marked 2 years since Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and we are joined now by the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. Good to have you back with us.
Good morning, Margaret.
It is a very solemn weekend. I know your president just acknowledged 31,000 Ukrainians have died in this fight. He also said that the Congress knows that your country is running out of funding and weaponry. Where are we right now? How close are we to having battlefield setbacks in a significant way?
Thank you. Yes, 2 years of full-fledged war, 10 years of war, 31,000 just defenders. We don't even know how many civilians actually are dead until we liberate everything. And we see on the battlefield that this war is still very winnable if we have supply of weapons and support, but also it's the war that unfortunately can be lost if the support is not there and we run out. So we really need it yesterday. And I'm very glad that there have been very active discussions all this time. And I really hope that the House will come back this week and that we will see real solutions and we will see decisions taken.
Well, you just heard from the two congressmen that they are now forcing consideration as soon as March the 7th for this aid to Ukraine. Your president said today, we need support within a month.
Absolutely, and that support could be there within a month. Like,
is military support enough?
Well, we need all the support. We need military support, we need budget support, we need humanitarian support, because we need to sustain the effort on the battlefield, but elsewhere. We need to care for people, we need to teach people, we need to create bomb shelters in order to protect. It's all very much interrelated. But what we also heard, and we know it, that we do have strong bipartisan support. We have the votes, as the two colleagues just said here. And also we know publicly from Speaker Johnson that he understands the need to win for all of us. It's a global security play. And we heard the concerns, you know, of course, some concerns are not related to us that he voiced, and some about the transparency and accountability. And we have provided a lot of information. So hopefully with the constant dialogue between the two parties, between the White House and Congress, we will see the decisions, because as we said for a number of times, we need it yesterday.
The White House says that Russia had its first battlefield victory in a year within the past week in this eastern town in Ukraine because there aren't enough weapons and ammunition being provided. And Jake Sullivan pointed to Congress as the reason why. Is it that simple?
Well, the war has always been about weapons. You know, we always had enough motivated Ukrainians to defend our homes, and we always needed more weapons at any given time. But of course, now the situation is critical. And I wouldn't call it a victory, because we defended Avdiivka for 10 years, and Russians simply destroyed it. They did not take it over. They destroyed the whole town like they've done to so many. And they already have lost almost 400,000 people in Ukraine trying to invade us. So, you know, we are winning this war. We liberated 50%. We cleared the Black Sea. It's a critical, pivotal point now in which if we receive the support and weapons, we can liberate more. And we can not only liberate us, we can defend the free world. Because it's not just about Ukraine. It's about Russia together with Iran and North Korea, who are supplying missiles, and all democracies together. Can we defend ourselves? And I really want to answer that question, yes.
Yeah, but it is becoming an election year issue, with the former president, Donald Trump, arguing against support for NATO, essentially. And he has a history with your president. And obviously that first impeachment hearing where he, that infamous phone call with President Zelensky. Are you looking at that really dictating what's possible right now? A presidential campaign is impacting what you are saying is the future of democracy in Europe.
Well, any president of the United States or any candidate to the president is the president of this great country that is based on the values for which we are fighting on the battlefield. it's, as I said a number of times, the issue of supporting Ukraine, freedom, democracy, the issue of standing together with a democratic ally is not a partisan issue. It's strongly bipartisan issue, and I'm sure it will be bipartisan. And I think the only competition there could be how to do it faster, how to win faster, how to show that democracies can stand their ground.
I met this week 3 children from Ukraine who had been kidnapped by Russia as part of this state-sponsored program. It was very hard to hear what these children have been through. But your government says there are at least 30,000 other kids that you know of who were also taken. How is it possible that there is no coordinated international effort right now to bring these children home?
This is not only a war crime and a tragedy, but something that is a blank in the international law. Russians actually claim they have hundreds of thousands of our children. They said 700,000, so it can be as bad as that. And literally, you know, it's one of the first times after World War II and Nazis when they simply abduct children, put them up for speedy adoptions, torture them, indoctrinate them, put them through this re-education camps. That's why we have created this Bring Kids Back UA initiative, and that's why we are so glad that so many countries, and I'm so glad that US has joined it, so we can actually formulate the mechanism of how to deal with it. And this is horrible. You know, Putin should be in prison until the last of his life, at least for this crime.
Just another thing that US funding is used for. Ambassador, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're back with former White House Russia expert Fiona Hill. Welcome back.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yesterday, the body of opposition leader Alexei Navalny was handed over to his mother after she had asked for more than a week to have him released, his corpse released. Why do you think Vladimir Putin changed his mind and let it happen?
I think he realised he'd gone far too far. He was starting to get protests even from Russian Orthodox priests. I mean, Putin prides himself on being this great religious leader of extolling Christian values. So there were Russian Orthodox priests saying that Putin was worse than Pontius Pilate in the Bible for denying, you know, the mother and the family the body, all kinds of celebrities. And of course, there was quite a bit of revulsion, you know, about this as well, because Navalny's mother, a very brave woman, actually went onto YouTube, which can still be seen inside of Russia as well, and basically pointing out that Putin or the Kremlin or the prison authorities were all acting against the law by not handing over the body. They were violating, you know, even their own norms and terms. And I think that really got a reaction, because people will look at the mother, you know, for who she is, the actual mother of someone who has died, not a political person until that moment. And I think it was really escalating out of control in terms of the message that the Kremlin was trying to enforce. It was making it a very big deal. The question now will be about the funeral, because, of course, what she said very openly was they were blackmailing her to have a secret funeral, so not to have the traditional Russian public viewing of the body and then basically a commemoration at the graveside. So it's going to be a question now about what they allow to happen next.
And whether he created a martyr,
He did. He has created a martyr. Absolutely right.
This past week, though, we saw not only the victory in eastern Ukraine, you saw the death of Alexei Navalny, you saw Russia take another American prisoner because she donated $50 to a Ukrainian charity. He seems very emboldened right now.
He is. And I mean, that's, you know, really fits into the whole theme of your discussions this morning. Putin thinks that he's winning because we've blinked, because we don't seem to have the courage, either politically or morally right now, to stand up and support Ukraine in fending him off and fending Russia off. He's also basically a month away for his reanointment. I can't really call it an election as the president of Russia. And Putin's basically saying, you're going to have me until 2036, because he can have 2 more 6-year terms. And I'm so much in control of this situation that I can do literally whatever I like. He's trying to intimidate everyone and to basically remove any sense of hope whatsoever. And, you know, these targeting of, you know, a young woman who was given $50, I mean, that's actually fairly ridiculous. But the whole message of it is to say, I mean business, any kind of dissent, no matter how minor, will be punished with the full weight of the state behind it.
Well, we're in the middle of an election in this country. You worked for Donald Trump when he was in office. He has continued to call himself a political dissident. he actually compared himself to Alexei Navalny.
It's a lot of dough.
It is a form of Navalny. It is a form of communism or fascism.
He's talking about legal cases against him. He's talking about Russia quite a lot on the campaign trail again. What's going on?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, former President Trump has made it very clear that he admires Vladimir Putin. I mean, he continues, to really extol him, despite all of the evidence, to the contrary, for what his view should be here, that Putin is an avowed enemy at this particular point of the United States. I mean, he's openly declared war on the United States. He's taking American citizens hostage. It's not just the young woman who was recently taken, who's a dual citizen, but it's also Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal. It's also Paul Whelan, the former Marine who was taken years ago. President Trump actually ought to have a sense of responsibility about American citizens. And instead, what he's doing in the most brazen and frankly shameful fashion is trying to suggest that the United States is like Putin's Russia. I mean, since when have we been assassinating our opposition candidates in this country? Since when have presidents of the United States been wanting to sort of take out political opponents through poisoning or through imprisoning them in, basically the equivalent of Arctic penal colonies? So what President Trump is doing is degrading the United States. I just don't understand how people don't call him out for this.
So we hear from Trump supporters at rallies, though, questions about aid to Ukraine. Is what he is talking, is he planting seeds that last, even if Joe Biden wins the election?
Of course he is. And he's also, frankly, parroting the kind of propaganda that we've been having coming out of Russia for more than a decade now. I mean, since Russia first made moves against Ukraine, which goes back a considerable period of time, to cut-offs of their gas back in 2006, for example, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, President Putin and the Kremlin have been a full-on propaganda effort, basically against Ukraine. And frankly, President Trump is starting to repeat some of the same things that the Russians have been saying too.
Fiona Hill, it's always great to talk to you. We hope to have you back again soon. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Before we go today, we want to wish our friend and colleague Bob Schieffer a very happy 87th birthday. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Bob. We'll see you all next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.